Hello everyone, and welcome to the EC2 Instance Setup lecture. Now that we have our Amazon Web Services account set up, we can go ahead and create an EC2 instance. Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2, is a web service that provides resizable compute capacity in the cloud. In layman's terms, you can basically think of this as just a virtual computer that you can access through the internet. So here's our overall plan. The first thing we're going to do is use the AWS console website to create an EC2 instance. Then we'll use SSH, or Secure Shell, to connect to the EC2 instance over the internet. However, you should note that SSH is a little different for Windows versus Mac and Linux, and we'll discuss those differences in the next slide. Once we've connected, we'll go ahead and set up Spark and Jupyter on the EC2 instance. Let's discuss Secure Shell. SSH stands for a Secure Shell Connection. If you're on a Windows computer, what you will do is you'll watch this lecture all the way through. We'll go ahead and show you how to set up the EC2 instance, and then we'll show you how to connect through SSH on a Windows computer. If you're on a Mac or Linux computer, you're going to watch the first half of this particular lecture where we set up EC2, and then I'll let you know when you can stop watching and skip to the next lecture for the SSH setup for Mac or Linux. Mac or Linux actually has a much easier time using SSH. It's already built into the operating system, so it's just two simple command lines. For Windows, it's a little more complicated than that, which is why we're going to show it all in this one lecture. And I'll let you know when you can finish watching if you're on a Mac or Linux computer. Basically, our overall goal is just to remotely connect to the command line of our virtual machine on Amazon EC2. So regardless of what operating system you're using right now, go ahead and go to your AWS console at aws.amazon.com and log in. I'll let you know when you can stop watching if you're on Mac or Linux. If you're on a Windows computer, you're going to watch this entire lecture. Let's go ahead and jump to aws.amazon.com and log in. Okay, here I am at aws.amazon.com. What you're going to go ahead and do is click Sign into the console. There'll usually be some sort of button either here or on the top right. Go ahead and click on Sign into the console and then fill in your email address and your password. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, here I am logged into the console, and you should see something similar to this. Now the interface may change, but basically what we want to do is figure out how to get to the EC2 service. Sometimes there'll be shortcuts here or quick starts, such as launch a virtual machine, EC2 instance, but in case you can't find it here on the main page, you can either search for it under Services, it'll be under Compute, EC2, or, let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit, you can just click here on the Services tab, go to Compute, and you should see EC2. It's under all AWS services as well if you go to EC2 here. So obviously there's a lot of services, but EC2 is the one that we're most interested in. So go ahead and click on that, and it will take you to a link that looks like this. What you're going to go ahead and do is then click on Launch Instance. Then you should see some options here, and it says choose an Amazon machine image. This machine image is basically what operating system you want on this virtual computer that we're setting up. What you're going to go ahead and do is scroll down and click on Ubuntu. Make sure it says free tier eligible, that way you don't get charged. So we're going to go ahead and select Ubuntu. Then you'll see something that looks like this, general purpose, and these are all the instance types you can create. We're going to use the free tier micro, which is the smallest available besides Nano, that it's totally free. It has one CPU and then 1 GB of memory, so it's quite small. And it has low to moderate network performance. But you can see later on, if you actually do want to pay for higher performance instance types, that the actual memory or gigabytes, essentially the RAM, goes up to 160. So there's quite large instances available to you. But right now we're just going to use the micro since it's free. So make sure you use free tier eligible, otherwise you'll have to pay. Then I'm going to go ahead and say next, configure instance details. And here we're going to say number of instances is equal to 1. As I mentioned earlier, when we're dealing with Spark or distributed systems, you may have a cluster of instances. When you're dealing with a real huge data set, you will put more than one instance here, but since we want everything to remain free, we're just going to use one instance. So make sure this is 1, everything else can be on the default, and we'll go ahead and add storage next. The default storage is just 8 GB. Go ahead and keep that, everything as the default here, and click Next Tag Instance. And here we can go ahead and create a tag instance. Go ahead and set this key to something like my Spark and we'll set the value equal to my machine. Doesn't really matter, but just write these down. Your key, my Spark, and value, my machine. Next, we're going to configure a security group. And here you'll see a drop-down for type. Go ahead and scroll down here, click on it, and click on all traffic. You should see create new security group and change type to all traffic. Everything else can be kept the same. You'll click on review and launch. And you should see a little prompt here that says improve your instance's security. Your security group is open to the world. Don't worry about that because you're going to want to be able to easily access your instance. However, if you're actually dealing with some sort of company platform, you probably don't want your security to be this open. But for now, since it's only going to be you using it, you can just go ahead and leave your instance security totally open. Once you have everything ready, we have our Ubuntu. It's on micro tier, 1 CPU, 1 memory. You have your security groups. It's set to all traffic. Everything's basically just defaulted except the all traffic. Let's go ahead and launch this by clicking launch. Here's a very important step. It's going to say select an existing key pair or create a new key pair. What you're going to go ahead and do is say create a new key pair. And then you're going to say key pair name. Here, let's go ahead and type new Spark, and this is incredibly important. Click download key pair. Now, you have to download this private key file. It's called a .pem file. You can see it popped up here on my lower left. You're not going to be able to download this file again after this window. So whatever you do, make sure that you say create new key pair, type in a key pair name, and say download key pair. This is absolutely important. If you don't do this step, you'll have to start all over again because there's no way to come back to this. So make sure you download this .pem file. Once you've done that, you're ready to launch your instance. It'll say initiating launch, and it says your instances are now launching. And then it'll say something like the following instances launches have been initiated. So you can go ahead and click on this instance, and it should take you to something that looks like this. It'll be pending a little while. If you actually pay for a larger Amazon Web Service instance, it'll probably be a lot faster than this. But here we're going to just wait till it's done implementing. And there we have it. Our instance state is running. And we have an instance ID, we have a public DNS, and those are the things we need. And we have our .pem file. You can also perform actions on this instance. The most important one to know is this terminate. So this terminate instance is the one you're going to use when you're done with this instance and you don't want to be running the risk of getting charged anymore. Now, as I mentioned, on the free tier, you have 750 hours a month for 12 months. That's an entire year. So you can basically keep this thing running for an entire month. But really, you should terminate it once you're done. That way you don't run any risk of getting charged any extra money. You should know it's extremely cheap to run these things, but it can add up over time. All right, so now if you're on a Mac or Linux computer, this is it. You're done. We've done everything as far as setting up our EC2 instance. All you had to do is follow the steps for launching that instance and download the .pem file. Go ahead and skip to the next lecture so you can see how to SSH connect to your instance. All right, if you're on Windows, keep watching. We're going to go ahead now and show you how you can connect to this instance command line. Now, what I want you to do is go ahead and go to google.com in a new tab. So I'm going to go ahead and go to a Google tab, and what I want you to do is, let me zoom in here, is search for this term, SSH space Windows space EC2. And it should take you to this connecting to your Linux instance from Windows using PuTTY. And I'm going to leave this link as a resource for the lecture. But go ahead and click on this link, and you should see a guide here to connecting to your Linux instance from Windows using PuTTY. This is exactly all the steps we're going to do to actually connect to our Linux instance using Windows Computer. Windows computers have a little more involved of a process in order to connect. Mac and Linux, it's very easy, but let's go ahead and walk through all these steps. I would recommend that you keep this documentation page open while you follow along with me. That way you have a reference for everything we're going to do. And you can either search for this link on Google, or you can actually just click on the resource link in this lecture. All right, so let's go ahead and walk through the user guide, and I will show step by step what we need to do. First, there are the prerequisites. Since we're on a Windows computer, we need to install PuTTY. PuTTY is going to allow us to do a secure shell connection to our EC2 instance. we can do it from the PuTTY download page. Go ahead and click on this link, or just Google search PuTTY download. You should see a page that looks like this. You're going to go ahead and click on, if we go ahead and zoom in here, on this download link. This will take you to a page that looks like this. You're going to scroll down till you see these binaries. We need to install two of these programs, putty.exe and then puttygen.exe. These are the two that we need. And then we're going to go ahead and save these here and call on them when we need them. So going back here, we're going to need to get the ID of the instance. You can actually just find it here under the instance ID column. We'll need that series of letters and numbers. We need the public DNS name. That's located right here, public DNS. And then we need to locate the private key. Remember, that was the .pem file. I have that saved under my downloads folder. And then you need to enable inbound SSH traffic. We actually already did that when we selected all traffic when we created the instance. All right, next step. Convert your private key using puttygen. So PuTTY doesn't natively support this .pem format, so what we need to do is follow these instructions to convert it to a private key. So I'm going to click here on puttygen, launch it, and you'll see that you get Windows protected your PC. If you get this message, go ahead and click More Options and Run Anyway. And then you should see the PuTTY key generator. So we'll go ahead and start puttygen. And then under type of key to generate, we'll select SSH2 RSA. And then we're going to go ahead and click Load in order to find the .pem file. So click Load here. And I'm going to go to my Downloads folder, go All Files, and search PEM. And here's NewSpark PEM. You should see that it successfully imported the foreign key. Click OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and say save the private key. So I'm going to save private key. And a pop-up will say, are you sure you want to save this key without a passphrase to protect it? Go ahead and say yes. And I'm going to just save this to my desktop with file name PuTTySpark and save that. Okay, so now our private key is in the correct format to use of PuTTY, and we're good to go. You can then go ahead and close the key generator. Next, we want to start a PuTTY session. So we're going to go ahead and use that PPK file that we just created as our private key. So go ahead and skip step 1, which is optional. Say Start PuTTY. So here we have putty.exe. I'm going to go ahead and click on that to start it. It should look like this. Then in the category pane, which is this pane right here, select Session and complete the following fields. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here. Notice in the category pane, we have Session, which is actually the default here. We're going to go ahead and say in the host name box, enter username at public DNS name. So if we look over here, we have the public DNS name. I'm going to go ahead and grab that. So I'm going to copy that and then go back to my PuTTY instance and then paste it here. And now we need to put in the username. For an Ubuntu user, if you go back here, we can see that Ubuntu, the username is Ubuntu. So coming back to the PuTTY, I paste in this whole DNS address and then say Ubuntu at that whole address. Select under connection type SSH, we have that there. Ensure that port is 22, that's correct. In the category pane, over here again, expand connection, expand SSH, then select AUTH for authorization. So category pane, expand connection, expand SSH, and click on authorization here. We'll go ahead and click browse, and we want to select the PPK file. Remember, it was on my desktop, and we called it puttyspark.ppk. There it is. Open it up. This is an optional C, but don't worry about it. We'll go ahead and go to letter D. Click open to start PuTTY session. I'm going to click open here, and you should see a security alert. The server's host key is not cached in the registry. We can trust this, so go ahead and say yes. Obviously, you trust it. You created this yourself. If you don't trust this, you could get a virus or something if you're connecting to someone else's instance, but this is our own instance. We created it, so of course we trust it. And there you go. Now we're able to connect directly to Ubuntu. So this is our virtual server. So if you type in Python here, you can actually just start using Python. So you can say print hello, enter, and there you have hello. And then we can go ahead and quit Python. All right, so this is basically a real connection to a virtual computer hosted somewhere through our command line. This is the SSH we were talking about. And that's all we have to do. So again, you can go ahead and post any questions you have to the Q&A forums, but basically just follow this Amazon guide. It tells you step by step what to do, and we just did it step by step on our own computer here. All right, hope you enjoyed this lecture. Hope it was useful to you, and feel free to post any questions you have and check out the documentation in case you get stuck anywhere. If you're a Windows user, go ahead and skip the next lecture, because the next lecture just talks about doing this SSH process on Mac or Linux computers. After that lecture, we're going to show you how to set up everything through this command line console. So make sure you keep this open, this command line console. All right, thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture.